You're listening to Surviving and Thriving with Renisha, a podcast about life, mental health, and personal growth. Here I talk about my journey living with borderline personality disorder, depression, and anxiety, and how I'm learning to love myself despite it. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. I am Rennie. For those of you who are new here, or might, be seeing me for the first time. Hello, hi. Um, I'm just gonna jump right into it, honestly. I'm gonna be honest right now. I am struggling. Surprise, surprise. I think a lot of people are at this time. There's a lot of heavy energies right now in the collective. There's a lot of feelings of confusion, angst, some I think what I'm picking up on especially is just like a withdrawal. I think a lot of people are overwhelmed with a lot of the energies at play right now. And, I've been withdrawing again. And if you're new here, I've talked about how I've kind of struggled with isolating and how, especially like between peak COVID in 2020 until around 2022, 2023, I was really like full hermit mode, fully to myself, completely isolated, really. Just maybe had like one person or two at most that I really talked to, regularly, and regularly was like weekly or monthly, so not even that regular to a lot of people. And so the past couple of years for me, I've been healing not only trauma, my mental illnesses and so forth, but and grief, but also just really learning to trust people again, finding community, and addressing some of the more avoidant parts of my personality, which has been a challenge. And lately, a lot of things have been resurfacing parts of that need to be healed. And I'm noticing that not just in myself, but in a lot of people. There is this desire to withdraw, and I'm such a proponent for taking time you need to take care of yourself. Like, I recognize and understand the importance of that as someone who's had to many times in my life take that time for introspection. But one thing that I've come to realize is there was some work that I thought I'd done that I'm realizing still needs to be done. And Spirit has made that clear. And for those of you who, you know, are new here, just know I might say words like spirit a lot. And I just want you to always just listen with an open heart. And also, just when it comes to language in general, think about what resonates for you. If you choose to focus on a higher power or higher version of yourself or whatever works for you, um, that's really what I suggest when listening to me, because sometimes my language doesn't resonate with people. And so I want to make sure I call that out so that you're open to receiving whatever message I have today. Because this is not scripted and I'm just going straight off the dome. So, yeah, I'm realizing there's a lot of parts of me right now, especially with everything that's going on in the world and all of the collective energies that are influencing my own journey, my own healing, all of the different factors, especially as someone who is a person of color living in America, who is neurodivergent, who's raising an autistic child, like all of these different things. Everything that's happening in collective is a bit destabilizing for a lot of people. But what I'm noticing for myself is that things that I thought that I had worked through or healed through are resurfacing. And I've talked a lot about how healing is not linear. So this is just a reminder again that it's not linear and it's normal for certain seasons of life to bring up some wounds that maybe you thought were healed or you worked through, and maybe there are some different layers. I've described in the past healing as like a layer, like an onion, sorry. You think that, okay, you've healed something, you're good, you're Gucci, you're ready to go, and then like something else triggers you or brings something up. And I am someone who describes myself as like a um for one, I'm a shadow worker, but for two, I very much am someone who brings catalyst energy. I'm a disruptor. Um, and so a lot of people have found, especially the more masculine energies, me to be very triggering. Um, and I've been very triggered by the masculine energies in this lifetime, my entire life. And so a lot of that has been resurfacing for me lately, and especially with leadership and what's happening in the collective, but even like on a more personal level, like throughout my life, I've had issues with men and masculine energies. And I'm also someone who myself I've had to protect myself, really adopt more of those masculine energies. And the past year, I'd say I've been really focused on healing the relationship I have with feminine energies. Um, and I'm not to be confused with gender. I'm not even speaking specifically to gender, but if we were to speak specifically to gender, then yes, I do have a lot of healing that I need to do with men in particular, both due to past trauma, from early childhood and so forth, to relationships, relationship dynamics, and just the interactions that I have with masculine energies have always had some friction. And I find that I am very triggering or triggered, one or the two. And so I am someone who at this stage in my recovery finds that being triggered is a this portal to deeper understanding about who you are, and it's an invitation to heal something that needs to be addressed that maybe hasn't been addressed. And so I really want to talk a little bit about processing emotions, because I think right now, as so many people do have triggers coming up, do have anxieties about what we're seeing in the news and what we're seeing happening in our communities and in our families, in our relationship dynamics, whether that be romantic, platonic, whatever, in your community. If you're someone who, like myself, you're going through a season where, or if you're continuously cycling through, like I do, periods of really withdrawing and calling back your energy and just not feeling, either you don't feel safe in the world or there's just some things coming up that are overwhelming you. So now you feel like it's best to kind of step back and be introspective. One thing I realized, in this process is that I wasn't fully processing my emotions. I thought that I was, especially because I used to be, for a period of time in my life, someone who just stopped crying. Like I didn't cry, I didn't really let myself feel emotions. And again, like I think when I had kind of adapted more masculine energies in order to survive, especially someone who was recovering from a lot of childhood trauma, I just kind of poured all of my energy into working or into studying or into whatever goals I had. And so I was very focused on my external, what was happening around me, what it is I wanted to see for my life, and like the hard work that it took to get there, right? I'm a fire sign, so I feel like that's pretty typical for us, is to just be so focused on like the action. What's needed? What do I need to do? What I need to get done? And so focusing on work and keeping myself extremely busy, I'd say for like a period of like 5 to 8 years, especially, I was like really busy all the time. Like I had so much going on at all times that people were always like, how are you doing all of this stuff? Like, how do you have time to do this? Aren't you a mom? Don't you have these issues? Blah, blah, blah. Like, that was something I got really accustomed to hearing. Um, and I never gave myself time to really sit with whatever I was feeling. And so I was just really used to disassociating or detaching from emotions. And I didn't realize it at the time, but also from my body, which is very much connected to emotions. I've learned in the past couple of years, especially. And so I just want to talk a little bit about how we could be processing our emotions and, everything that's coming up. And I feel like throughout this year, it's going to be really important for us to kind of figure out the best way, as individuals, for us to work through whatever's coming up for us in whatever way that looks like. And I talk a lot about like the routines and, the structures you can put into place to kind of maintain stability. But I think that I'd been really focused on maintaining equilibrium in my life and balance, when in actuality, there were some things that I wasn't allowing myself to fully process. And Spirit has made that very clear through some of the experiences, interactions, and just things that have been coming up for me, whether it be in dreams, because I am someone who dreams are a big part of my spiritual journey and my healing journey. I get a lot of messages in my dreams. I'm just like out in the ether sometimes, or whether it be through like relationships or interactions or difficulties or whatever, right? And so I think it's important to recognize when we are allowing ourselves to fully feel our emotions and acknowledge our emotions versus when we're either distracting ourselves from it or overanalyzing it. One thing that I noticed about myself as I'm still healing from someone that I would describe as embodying a lot of masculine energies, and also to clarify, I'm not saying masculine energies are bad. I think there needs to be a balance of those energies. And when I'm talking about it again, I'm not talking necessarily about gender, I'm talking about energies. And so I can put like in the description what I mean by that. Just being mindful of time right now. So, what I mean when I say that in myself is that I was trying to fix everything, right? And I was actually talking to a really good friend about this recently, is that as someone who has been recovering from past unalived attempts, trigger warning, so sorry. I'm someone who struggled with suicidal ideation for a lot of my life. Um, and I've been like, for the past 5 years or so, healing from a previous attempt, and I've had multiple attempts. And I realized that as I like dove deeper into my mental health recovery, my spiritual journey, my trauma healing, all of these things, that I was really trying to figure out the fastest way to fix whatever I need to fix so that I could be healed. And also do whatever I need to do on a spiritual level so that I don't have to ever incarnate on this planet ever again. And I realized that that's rooted in this feeling that I have that I, for one, don't belong here. And for two, am uncomfortable here, very uncomfortable here. Earth in general has never felt like home. I've always felt like an alien, and I've heard so many different thoughts from people on this, especially someone who's like recently been like tested and checked with for autism. And so, walking through life as someone who's a woman of color, someone who grew up the way that I grew up and the experiences that I had, and also being neurodivergent, and just experiences I've had with relationships and friendships and so forth, like it logically makes sense that I feel this way, but a very heart-driven person, so logic alone is not good enough for me. So I'm someone who just felt on a deeply spiritual level. Like I don't know if I've had lifetimes other places for sure, but I do not understand planet Earth and I don't know why I'm here. And so I really been that those feelings have been coming up a lot, especially with everything that's going on um in this country, but just globally, just in the collective in general. I've just had this feeling of like, oh my God, like of Earth, like why am I here? But at the same time, I've had so many experiences that have made me so incredibly grateful. I've been really reconnecting with planet Earth, with nature, being out in the garden, learning about herbs, doing things that I think are helping me feel more at home, connecting with people who are more aligned. And that's been helping me a lot to move through these heavy emotions. But one thing that I'd realized I was doing for so long was just really either avoiding this feeling or overanalyzing it. And one thing that I struggle with, especially as someone who, has been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and is someone who identifies as autistic and has gone through like some of that diagnostic, whatever you want to call it, just trying to figure out how I perceive life, how my brain functions compared to the norm or whatever. One thing that's come up for me is I fixate. I fixate a lot. If there's something I'm interested in, if there's something I'm curious about, if there's someone I'm curious about, I fixate. I have like special interests that I fixated on since I was a teenager. I have like certain topics that I fixate on. I've had people that I fixated on. I've had like thoughts that I fixated on as well. And I realized that like I get in this kind of spiral of over analyzing things so that I can figure out what the next best step is so that I can resolve any type of friction or like any discomfort that I feel. I'm very much like I've adapted from my past experiences and from my trauma, this like need to be in control. And my need to be in control kind of feeds into my fixations and my like desire to try to fully understand everything and everyone. that I'm interested in or curious about. And I know this sounds like such a ramble. Bear with me. But this leads me back to my point that I realized that in over analyzing and just kind of processing in my mind my emotions, I wasn't really fully processing my emotions. I kind of led myself to believe, or maybe like I feel like this was kind of subconscious to be honest, that me sitting and thinking about and reflecting on how I feel was me processing my emotions. And I'm someone who's always journaled. So I thought, oh, like I'm gonna sit with this. I'm gonna think about this. And so I'll sit and I'll think and I'll think and I'll think and I'll think and I'll overthink and I'll think 50 million times. And now I've like created 50 new problems and I'm spiraling. Or even if like maybe I do feel like I can kind of weed my way through it and thought I am like journaling it. I'm like writing out my responses. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I did a good job. I'm like, it's all being processed here in the mind. And I'm realizing how complex our emotions are and how interweb they are with our spirit, with our minds, with our bodies, all of it. And so if I'm just thinking about it and reflecting on it and being introspective in that very logical way only, but I'm not actually like feeling it. I'm not feeling how this emotion feels in my physical body. I'm not actually like feeling the emotion, right? Like sometimes I know I'm sad, for example. Lately, I've been feeling very sad and very lonely, which is it annoys me. Like then I have like these layers of emotions because I'm annoyed that I'm sad. I'm annoyed that I'm feeling lonely, especially when I do have people and like I make a decision to withdraw from people. So then I get annoyed with myself. Anyway, that's a whole that's a whole nother topic. Um, but yeah, so there's like the layer, right? Like I noticed I was feeling sad and I was upset that I was feeling sad, like annoyed that I was feeling sad. And then I started to try to process that in my mind, right? Logically figuring out why am I sad? What's making me feel this way? And I've gotten really good at that. I've gotten really good at processing my emotions logically. Like I've been journaling, I've been writing down, noticing patterns like, oh, I've been neglecting some of my self-care things, or oh, I'm seeking some type of external validation for something, or oh, it's something from my childhood resurfacing, um, or it's something physical in my body, whatever. I can figure out from a logical standpoint. But what I really struggle with is allowing myself to really process that fully. So, like, how do I need to cry? Like, can I just cry? Or do I feel like crying? Am I holding back from doing that? Do I feel tension in certain parts of my body? I tend to be someone that holds a lot of tension, like here in this area, in my womb space, which is where I held a lot of trauma and I've hold a lot of trauma and a lot of women hold trauma in that space. And I've been doing work to heal that because I also have like physical ailments that center the womb as well, like PCOS and things like that. Um, and so I've been really trying to actually like allow myself to fully process the emotions in all aspects of that. And so I really want to get into just some ways I'm learning how to do this. And again, if you're here, we're doing this together. I'm not someone who has it figured out. And I think unfortunately I might come across like that at times if you're new here or if you're just getting to know me, maybe I come across as stable or as someone who does kind of have like I'm grounded and have it figured out. I'm not grounded and I'm not stable. I'm in the process of stabilizing and balancing myself, and I'm in the process of healing and figuring it out. And we're doing this together. Um, and so some things that I've been really working on, for one, in my body, like really noticing how emotions present in my body, not just the thoughts that are coming up for me, not just analyzing it, but like how do I feel? Do I feel tense in my neck? Do I feel tense in my shoulders? Is my jaw clenched? Because I notice my jaw's clenched a lot. Am I holding my breath a lot? Because I am a shallow breather, which usually means that there's also some anxiety or some fear there. That's something that I've learned in the past year, especially like my breathing is a problem. I struggle to breathe deeply, and it's something I've been really working on. Like, do I feel it in my head? Is my head warm? Um, I can be hot-headed, and it's something that I've healed a lot recently. Like I used to be. If you've been here from the start or you listen to old episodes, you could probably hear how different I sounded when I was in states where I was more manic or more dysregulated, discombobulated, whatever you want to call it. You can tell the difference. So some growth and healing has taken place for sure. But also like, do I feel sick in my stomach and do I feel in my womb? Like kind of do a body scan and kind of go through and identify where you're feeling tightness and tension and soreness, discomfort of any kind. Because that can also clue you into some emotions that might be being suppressed or repressed or not fully expressed in the way that they need to be expressed. And again, you could be logically aware of how you're feeling, but again, this is just like how can you move fully through? Like, are there emotions manifesting in your body in some way through illness, through like habits that you're having trouble breaking, through tension, like all these different areas. Like for me, some other toxic patterns that I've had issues with, like some patterns that I really struggled with peak COVID when I was really like rock bottom, dark night of the soul, Rennie, like a totally different version of myself. But I'm someone who struggled with, and also trigger warning again, eating issues in the past. And lately I've lost a lot of weight. And I was also talking to a good friend about how at first I thought I was being healthy, but I realized that um I was over controlling again because it got to a point where I was restricting a lot, a lot. It was like more and more and more, even though I was eating better, right? And now I feel like I'm kind of flipped back because I'm like, oh, I need to eat. But instead of really being conscious about what I am consuming, I've been ordering it out again more. And so just back and forth between, these old toxic habits that I had in the past where I used to be in a very severe binge restriction cycle where I would eat a shit ton of unhealthy food and yeah, TMI, I won't go further into that if you're someone who's struggled. Especially I don't want to trigger anybody by talking about it in depth, but you probably kind of get the gist of where I was going with that. Um, and so I noticed that some of the desires that I had then are resurfacing. Some of like the foods that I used to crave, which I was like, I haven't craved this type of food in a minute. Like, what's going on? And I know I used to jokingly say that like I had food warning signs. Like if I ever ordered McDonald's or Taco Bell, that was like a mental hospital trip was around the corner. Like not even kidding. Like I wish I was joking. I'm not joking. Like if I ordered Taco Bell or McDonald's, call a therapist, call somebody, I'm not okay. So thankfully haven't ordered those in years. But I was ordering food that was like less than ideal. Like it was definitely not aligned with where I was headed and taking care of my body and learning to love myself in that way. And so I noticed those patterns resurfacing. I noticed the patterns of fixating on things, people, distracting myself. And so I had to sit with like, okay, the logical side, like what's happening in my mind, what's underneath the surface, what are some feelings that maybe I haven't really been sitting with but then I also had to just like scan my body. What's going on with my body? Oh, my stomach's been hurting a lot. Oh, my womb space, like I'm having rough periods again. Like what's going on? And like really sit with that and kind of allow myself to just kind of feel it, not just think about it, but feel it in my body and be present with it, which is really hard, really, really hard to do. Um, and something I've just been working on is finding more time to slow down and just breathe and allow the whatever emotions to come up because sometimes when we are over analyzing it, we're just thinking about it. Or if we're someone is distracting ourselves with work or with family or with friends or with hobbies or whatever, right? There's a difference between taking care of yourself and regulating your nervous system and so forth, and actually avoiding emotions. And I realized that I'm someone who can be really avoidant to my emotions. And it's frustrating because I am such an advocate for feeling my emotions and I talk about it all the time. And so coming to the realization that I'm actually not allowing myself to fully feel my emotions and I'm avoiding some things or that I feel like I'm trying to find like a solution or some type of external thing that can help me move through it is frustrating. And it's something that's come up a lot for me recently. And so, what I've been trying to do is just, and I know I always talk about meditation, but just not even necessarily meditation in the traditional sense that people tend to think about, but just finding time to sit and try to quiet my mind, or at least like not identify or attach myself to whatever thoughts are coming up. Just ignore them for a little bit, which is hard to do. It's taken years of practice to get to the point where I can really sit and like listen to the surroundings and feel safe enough in my body to be present in the moment. And so, also just want to say that if you are a trauma survivor, and especially if you like myself, had a lot of severe childhood trauma, it can be really hard to do that. It can take a lot of time. So don't beat yourself up if you struggle with stillness or meditation, because a lot comes up when you sit in stillness, which is kind of point, right? You have to make sure you feel safe first in your body, you feel safe in the world. And so that's a whole other thing. And I've talked about this a little bit in past episodes, but thankfully I have gotten to that place. And so I try to sit in stillness and try my best to just be present, listen to the sounds, do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things I hear. Again, I forget this every time. So annoying. Um, and then after a while of sitting like that for as long as I can, because I am a restless person, usually something will just come up. Another thing that I had come across that's helped me is like tapping. I was doing acupuncture before, which also I feel like I cried damn near every time. So that definitely, if you that's something that you do have access to, then I would recommend it if you are ready for it. But just know that if you are someone with a lot of trauma, it could bring up a lot. It could bring up a lot if you have a lot of suppressed emotions, because there are certain points in my body where it's like I'm just touched there and I cry. I remember someone massaged me like underneath here, this area, and I literally sobbed out of nowhere. There were other parts of my body where I was massaged and I just started laughing hysterically. So thinking through somatic work, and this doesn't mean you have to go to a professional. There are things you can do at home. Like one thing I've been doing is like shaking my body more, moving my hips a lot. I love to dance. I've been dancing my whole life, and so doing less choreography and more static dance and free movements, moving my hips more, shaking, like I shake myself out, which is really good too if you are like neurospicy or dysregulated. It's good for resetting the nervous system. Stimming, moving your body in this way, it brings up a lot. Like if you just stand up and start shaking your body or shaking your hips for like 10 minutes, and you'll really, and you're intentional about it, something probably might come up if you have some suppressed emotions. Not always, it can take time for some people, but that's been the case for me. So that's something I've been doing. But also just recognizing that we do unfortunately still live in a culture that kind of normalizes suppressing emotions that we find challenging. I don't want to label them as bad, because I think all emotions are an invitation to explore yourself on a deeper level. So I'm trying to refrain from labeling them as bad or negative. They might feel like shit, excuse my language, but just because they feel like shit doesn't mean it's not something that could benefit you or teach you something. And ultimately, that could be for the best, right? If you let it come up and feel it and heal through it, then you could probably move to a happier, more fulfilled, balanced life. That's the goal, right? And so anything that gets you to that point is a positive thing, I'd like to think. At least that's how I've come to try to understand it. And that's what's helping me move through these really terrible emotions that are coming up right now. And so learning to sit with the discomfort, creating and finding spaces to feel, for me, safe space is the bathroom. I have always been someone who cried in the shower. I've always been someone who cried in the bath. I don't like crying in front of people. And the past couple years have been humbling because I've cried in front of quite a few people. And I noticed that the people that I do cry in front of, I tend to either get fixated on or there's some type of emotional bond, like some type of bonding happens for me because I'm so not used to having a space with other people where I can be emotionally vulnerable because I didn't grow up in an environment like that. My family, we never did that. We didn't hug each other. We didn't say I love you. We didn't cuddle each other. We didn't cry in front of each other. Like unless it was like a rage type of crying, like, angry tears. Um, so I noticed that and that's been coming up for me and that's something I've been trying to work through too. But just so I'm talked about semantic processing and just how you can learn to actually move emotions through your body through shaking and dancing and breath work and all of these things. But I also want to touch on learning to discern between whether you are picking up on other people's emotions or your own. That's another thing that I've struggled with, especially as someone who considers myself to be empathic. I've actually, I think, periods of my life, and I still kind of go back and forth between being very apathetic and being very empathetic. And I think the apathy has really come from not only my trauma, my experiences there, and just, mental health issues as well, but also from like a protective standpoint. I like kind of would withdraw and isolate from people and start to detach myself from people and try not to allow myself to care to the point to where I just didn't, at least not on the surface as a protective measure because I get overwhelmed by other people's feelings quite easily. And right now, with everything going on in the world and the fact that just literally at our fingertips, we can just, see atrocities, we can see people's trauma, we can see and feel people's pain. At least when I watch people suffering, I feel their pain. If you resonate with that, then it's really important, one, to learn how to balance staying informed with stepping back. I talked about this in the last episode with taking a step back and taking care of yourself. You can stay informed in ways that doesn't necessarily have to always trigger your nervous system into fight or flight mode. And it's not selfish, despite what some people say. Yes, there are periods of time when you do need to just be uncomfortable because some things in the world aren't comfortable. And feeling those emotions are what allow you to be inspired to create some type of change in the world. But also if you are someone who's already healing from a bunch of different things, you don't want to get into a state to where you literally can't function now, or you're so dysregulated or imbalanced that you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others, you can't really contribute in any meaningful way. And I talked about this. So I encourage you, if you're at that space, to go listen to that episode. Um, and so it's really important to recognize, like, if you are absorbing other people's energy, do you live in an environment that's dysfunctional? I know, like, for me, I feel like my whole life I've been picking up on other people's projections and other people's energies. And sometimes I think part of the reason I've grappled with just existing on this planet is I feel like I've always kind of take like taken the brunt of other people's frustrations. Like, I feel like I felt like an easy target for a lot of my life. Like, oh, this like quirky, kind of odd, kind of triggering person is here. And it's either like, I don't know, I ignored people, I triggered people, I brought something up in people that made them uncomfortable. And this has been the case my whole life. Just me just being myself, like me trying to be honest, me just expressing myself triggers people sometimes. If you resonate with this, hi, hello, let's be friends. But like that feeling has led me to feeling like a lot of my life like people were projecting their feelings onto me, their frustrations onto me. And if they were going through something that had absolutely nothing to do with me just showing up and being who I am, just like the very quirky, oddball that I've always kind of been, they're like, "Ugh," like, and so it makes you an easy target for them to project whatever insecurities, whatever traumas, whatever unprocessed, unresolved emotional issues, because so many of us carry so many unprocessed wounds. Um, they project that onto you, and it's really exhausting. And it could be really easy if you're not someone who has sat with your own emotions to confuse that those feelings that come up with like being your feelings, they might not even be yours. And so learning if whatever you're feeling is even coming from you, um, because I'm someone who's deeply spiritual, if I'm feeling really off out of nowhere, I usually try to do some type of cleansing, even if it's just like saying, like, okay, I'm releasing whatever this is. Like, if my thoughts are suddenly really negative or dark or whatever, I'm releasing whatever that is. I'm taking a salt bath. I'm doing a smudge, whatever I need to do. I need to go outside in nature because nature is a really good way to reset the energies. If I need to cleanse myself in water, water is super purifying, especially salt water. And like whatever I need to do I need to pray? Do I need to sit in stillness? Do I like what do I need to do to gauge if this is mine, if this is someone else's? Usually taking some time to sit in stillness will help me kind of sense if it's mine or not, and some type of cleansing too. I can share in the show notes just some videos that I like to listen to. If you're woo-woo like me and you appreciate things like that, then I encourage you to check it out. But that is one thing that's going to be really important, I think, throughout this year, especially if you're someone who is digesting a lot of content. Please don't doom scroll. There are ways to be informed without doing that because I realized by being kind of obsessively online and on social media, I was picking up so many energies, so many heavy, dense energies. And taking a step back or being more intentional about how I use the internet is slowly but surely helping me kind of find equilibrium and kind of recognize where some of these are just my issues. And also just be mindful like the energies of the people around you, the people you live with, your friends, your family. Um, Even if they might externally appear stable, energy doesn't lie. So if you feel off when you're around certain people, pay attention to that. And it's really going to be a practice, I think, this year in general, with really learning to trust yourself again and learn to trust your intuition and to find spaces that feel safe for you and that make you feel good, and to find people and spaces and communities that make you feel good, and to move away and set boundaries from those who don't. And mind you, this doesn't mean that people are bad. Like you could just be on with people at certain points in your life, or people could be bringing up things in you that maybe you're not ready to address. Like I, again, am someone who's triggered people a lot, and there are people who triggered me, but that doesn't mean I think of them as a bad person. It just means that either I'm not in a stage of life where I'm ready to confront the things that this person is bringing up in me, or maybe I don't feel aligned or they don't feel aligned. And so if you're listening to this and you're thinking, shoot, like, do I need to cut off some friends? Do I need to like break up with so and so? Do I need to just take some time to really sit with that? Don't make any hasty decisions. I'm someone who's quite impulsive. It's a trademark trait of BPD. Um, I make hasty decisions all the time, and I'm very much like when I feel uncomfortable, I just want to take action. I guess I don't know, fire sign thing. There's a lot of labels I could throw out that could probably make sense of why I'm like this, but if you resonate with that, then I encourage you to pause because I've ruined a lot of good things in my life by being impulsive in this way. So pause and sit with it. Sit with it before you decide to just jump the gun and cut people off, so and so. Kind of observe it. Just take time to observe how you're feeling in certain environments around certain people and certain spaces, and then you can maybe think about what next steps you should take. Um, and then yeah, so and just I'm gonna wrap this up because the way that this podcast episode is just discombobulated is like really a reflection of my mental state right now. It's everywhere. It's all over the place. It's everything everywhere all at once. And I'm sure other people can resonate with that during this time. And so I'm gonna wrap up and probably just honestly go just sit in stillness, like I just recommend 50 times to do. But I do just want to remind everyone that in these hard times, the best thing you can do is find spaces that make you feel okay, find people that make you feel okay, um, get together and do something to shift your energy and to do something that you feel like pours more love into this world. I know it can be really easy to add to this collective stress and density. It's so easy to fall into these spirals. It's so easy to let yourself get down in the depths. And sometimes that's required. There's a lot you can learn from being down in the depths about who you are. Um, but you're never meant to stay there. And as someone who spent a great portion of my life there and it's just been continuously climbing my way back out, uh, it's possible. It's just hard. It's annoying. And I'm so sorry if you're someone right now that you're struggling and you're just like, oh, I'm over it. If you're in that space, you're not alone. Um, I'm still learning continuously like how to move through these cycles and it's exhausting, but we're here. So anyway, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. I hope that something from this ramble was helpful. And I'm gonna go. So until next time, bye.